Once you have your hands on that data and you have access to a powerful tool like artificial intelligence to make it easy to interact with that data, to ask questions of that data, to drill into the data, to identify patterns that you might have missed, because none of us can look at all of these, what might be millions and millions of data points collected, let's say, over the course of years, if you've been collecting that data. Now you've got this incredible asset that you can use to augment your human decision making. But it is always absolutely critical to keep control of your agency, your autonomy, your authority, and ultimately your accountability for running a great event.
Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of the Keynote Curators podcast. I'm Seth Deckman, your Keynote Curator. Our guest today is Greg Verdino. Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Seth. Thanks so much for having me.
For our listeners and our viewers, you'll realize right away that Greg and I share the same barber, two beautifully ping-pong bald men just trying to find their way in this world of glamour in online digital media. So, we've got our work cut out for us today, Greg.
What is more glamorous than being bald and bespectacled, right? At the end
Right.
of the day.
Pretty much. That's why you don't see many of us online. It's a hard road to hoe. I also want to welcome our subscribers and our viewers and our first timers. Thank you for returning. Thank you for giving us a shot the first time. We appreciate it. Today, we're going to be talking about marketing, business, artificial intelligence, and all things having to do with how to make your operation flourish and grow. And by the end of this video, you're going to be able to learn, you're going to be able to act on what you learn throughout our conversation on, again, business, marketing, artificial intelligence, and real strategies to flourish, to grow, to expand your capacities, optimize your output, and live a more fulfilled personal and business life. So, Greg, let's get into the heart of the matter. Artificial intelligence, it's ubiquitous. That's a fancy word for saying it's pretty much everywhere. I have a lot to say about it, but I think you're the person that's more important in this conversation to share with us your thoughts on AI, specifically related to a large majority of our audience who are event planners. So, Greg, what are some of the ways that event planners can use AI tools?
Sure. How much time do we have? An hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 10 hours? Right. There's obviously many
I've
different ways.
scheduled 3 weeks. So other than bathroom breaks, which we can edit out, we should go ahead and be able to cover that.
Great. So sure enough, the first thing I want to say before we get into any practical applications is there is a lot of hype out there. Particularly around generative AI, that it kind of feels a little bit like a miracle machine or sounds a little bit like a miracle machine. And it's almost become pixie dust sprinkled across everything. It is not good for all that ails you. I mean, that is a fact. And generative AI alone is not all of AI. There are plenty of other forms of AI that have been with us for decades that aren't getting as much attention as generative AI is today. That come into play when you start to think about how do you apply these things practically in any kind of business. So having said all of that as a rambly preamble, I can kind of rattle off a number of things that event planners could or should be thinking about, many of which maybe they are, right? So let's kind of break them down into some chunks. So the first thing is the actual planning, putting an event together, right? So there are ways that you can use AI for things like venue selection, for finding and identifying the right kinds of speakers, even potentially for evaluating speakers, whether that's your keynote or whether that's all of the different abstracts and proposals you've gotten for your breakout sessions. Certainly making that job quicker and easier. I would say agenda recommendations and scheduling, using analytics, all the data from your past events, the feedback, the attendance numbers, all of that kind of good stuff to make some decisions about what the next agenda should look like. Trend analysis, look outside your own organization, what's hot in your industry, what's hot among your customers, your customer base, your attendee base, what are competitive conferences doing that you can either learn from or stand apart from. There's all kinds of good stuff like that. You can even automate vendor process. You can automate logistical stuff, and that's just planning. Now you get into promotion, right? And that's where, a lot of the conversation around generative AI naturally goes, right? We can automate the creation of content, whether that's speaker bios, session descriptions, outbound emails, website copy, all that kind of good stuff, artificially generated images, videos, all that stuff to get the word out there. Even things like using chatbots to offload, I guess I would say level one support, all the basic routine, repeatable questions that come in about what time is this and where is that? What's the hotel rate? When's the early bird end? And all of that kind of stuff can all be automated so you can focus your people on the more sophisticated, complicated, complex tasks and stuff. Then there's, of course, the profit stuff. You can do attendance forecasting. You can do things like use beacons to track traffic through your exhibit hall and price your exhibit space accordingly. The stuff that I like most probably comes down to personalization. I'm starting to see some organizers do this kind of stuff where whether you're using a chatbot to do it or you're using other kinds of interfaces, letting people put together their own personalized view of the agenda tells them, where to go when and what to go to next so that each event feels truly personalized. Or you might remember if you were an Olympics viewer or were paying any attention to the way the Olympics, and what's bigger than the Olympics from an event standpoint? But if you were following some of the AI things that were happening around the Olympics, there was an AI Al Michaels. I don't know if you heard about that or if your listeners, right? Where anybody could sign up and express some preferences and interests and get a truly personalized one-to-one video voiced by Al Michaels every single day, catching them up on what happened in the sports they're following or whatever. Imagine, you're probably not going to use Al Michaels, but imagine, let's say, the CEO of your association or the CEO of your organization, if it's a customer conference, doing truly one-to-one personalized recaps for every attendee, right? There's a lot of cool stuff and a lot of really just down to earth, brass tacks, practical stuff.
Yeah.
And it really takes, I think, I don't know if it's a mindset shift, but a willingness on the part of the events professional to look beyond the sort of the standard stock, I can do this with ChatGPT application of AI and think about all the different ways data can help them run a better, more engaging event.
Yeah. I mean, it's not everything that ails us, right? You use the word pixie dust, and really the generative, the chat GPT, Claude, Perplexity, whatever it is, are just one aspect of it. In fact, artificial intelligence, we type in a search on Google and in the field, it finishes the word for you. That is some type of artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna ask you to land the plane for me. I'm gonna throw out a kind of a word salad or a salad of questions and thoughts and ideas and bring it all in. With event planners, you just delineated some real specific areas where they can roll their sleeves up, get to work, apply AI, and it makes them more efficient. It gives them clarity. You can recover some time to be more creative or connect with more people one-on-one. I believe, and I'm closer to the short bus than I am to the line of valedictorians, that AI will not take their jobs, but a human armed with AI will take the job of a human unarmed with AI. And with that said, it's important to be able to distinguish, like you said, all these areas that are very rich places to utilize, deploy AI, but help us out with where they're not to be used.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's one question. And then here's my last piece. AI, like you said, is not the pixie dust, and it's not the WD-40 for every one of our ailments, or in the Wild West, the guy who came on the wagon and had an elixir that could solve every malaise that somebody had. At the end of the day, you can utilize AI to synthesize, to summarize, to compile, but the human needs to make the final decision. The human needs to make the go, no go. You can go up to Everest, be at base camp. You can go ahead and compile your altitude, the weather, the wind, moisture, the surface, radar, lidar, infrared, all the aspects of what it is to go up the mountain. But then somebody has to actually make the choice. You're not going to ask ChatGPT, should we go to the summit today? Right? Connect
Right.
that idea with what I said and kind of the hodgepodge of what I delivered
Sure.
with, look, event planners are saturated. You speak a lot. They're overloaded with, the chief cook and the bottle washer and everything in between. Oh, now, Greg, great. Now I need to learn how to write a prompt and then deploy it and be more effective. Another thing to do. So a lot there. Go.
Okay, wow. So that was a lot. So let me build on, I think, one of the key themes that you hit on there, which is the role of humanity versus technology. And I mean, there's a sort of a macro conversation to be had about that, in terms of all of human society. But without boiling the entire ocean, I think it's almost a mindset as much as it is anything else, right? That um, the way I would put it is AI is a great assistant, but it's going to be a terrible boss, right?
Right.
So, at the end of the day, there's a lot of conversation in AI circles. This may or may not be a phrase that, the general public uses or thinks about or has heard, but we talk a lot about having a human in the loop, which essentially means these systems are not fully autonomous, even though they are becoming more autonomous by the day. But even then, they're not fully autonomous, and everything requires a certain amount of human checks and human balances.
Is
I
autonomy,
would
is
take
that what people sometimes I've heard being called an agent?
agents, yeah.
Yeah.
So, typically the distinction is when you talk about an AI assistant, it typically means something that is reactive to your
Sure.
prompt, to your inquiry, your question, your request, or whatever. And it doesn't act on your behalf, but it provides you with information. An agent is a system that's capable of performing entire tasks autonomously. So, easy example for anybody that's not familiar with and hasn't been following that conversation is if I'm going to a conference, I might ask ChatGPT, what's the best hotel among these three that are, that have room blocks, let's say. And ChatGPT will scour its training data and give me an answer and say, it's the Hilton, the Marriott, and the Holiday Inn. You want to stay at the Hilton. It's, got higher reviews. It's closer to the venue, whatever the criteria are. Um, but an agent, I would then perhaps make a subsequent request and say, fantastic, book me a room at the Hilton for this night and this night. I want a high floor far from the
Right.
elevator.
And
And
they'll
it would
know
actually
your
go
they'll know your
through
rewards number and all that kind of stuff.
exactly. And it will
Yep.
complete that task for me. Um, we're not quite there yet. The technology doesn't quite work as promised, but it's coming quickly. And all of the big companies, from OpenAI to Microsoft to Anthropic with Claude, have announced this kind of technology, at least in sort of alpha, beta kind of
Sure.
mode. But nonetheless, that aside, when I think about human in the loop, I'm thinking human in charge. To your point, you don't want to rely solely on these systems for decision making, but you absolutely do want to rely on these systems for informing the decisions you make. And that's actually a big challenge for a lot of organizations because it means data-based decision making. And a lot of organizations have a lot of data challenges. And my consultancy, CognitivePath, works with a lot of associations. And we see very consistently that they might have, let's say, a CRM system like a Salesforce or something
Sure.
doesn't speak with their association management software, which doesn't speak to their community platform, which doesn't speak to their event management software, which doesn't speak to the lodging platform, right? But you need data from all of those systems to come together to do things like use this to make database decision making, right? So, certainly a lot of organizations need to think about how they clean those data problems. But once you have your hands on that data, and you have access to a powerful tool like artificial intelligence to make it easy to interact with that data, to ask questions of that data, to drill into the data, to identify patterns that you might have missed because none of us can look at all of these, what might be millions and millions of data points collected, let's say, over the course of years, if you've been collecting that data. Now you've got this incredible asset that you can use to augment your human decision making. But it is always absolutely critical to keep control of your agency, your autonomy, your
Yeah.
authority, and ultimately your accountability for running a great event. I think there's a second thing, and I'm not sure if you touched on it or if it just kind of, to me, goes hand in hand with this concept of, of AI makes decision making easier, faster, better. It increases your efficiency, your
Sure.
productivity, so on and so forth. To me, the most important question is now, what do you do with your time? Right? Because the typical, kind of Fortune 500 CEO's answer might be, oh, well, you lay off 30% of the staff and you throw that to the bottom line. But to me, that's kind of a dim view, right? To me, it's now, how do you empower people to do more meaningful work? So how do you take the time you saved as an event planner and where you might have been spent it on the rote, the routine, the repeatable, the administrative, the logistical, the stuff that can be automated away. If that's 20%, 30%, or 90% of your time, how do you throw it into doing the things that are uniquely human, at least for
Right.
now, right?
Right.
Like relationships, like
Yeah.
creativity, like
Yeah.
innovation, like empathy, like,
Yeah.
all of these things that I think really make a good events person stand apart.
Yeah. I mean, in my operation, in my agency, we're using it, and it's slowly working its way into a lot of different, whether it's copy we're doing,
Yeah.
editing this podcast, leveraging it on some website capabilities, outreach, on and on. Some of our processes, agreements, invoicing, a lot of areas. And, I'm, as a pedestrian thinker myself and a D-list celebrity in the world of podcasting, we're using it to prepare for you as a guest. And it's freed me up to be more in simple, low hanging fruit, making the questions simpler, although I'm a little bit long winded, making the questions focused on what we now have learned about what our audience and our viewers and our outreach are hungry for and have an appetite for, to know. That has allowed me, I'm like testimonial. Can I get a witness? I'm testament to it. In my preparation, I've been able to be a little bit more present, a little bit more calm, get a little bit deeper, whether it's, I'm researching your videos and reading, checking out your books and looking at your bio and your
Right.
topic descriptions and I have more time for that. And I'm not as rushed with some of the low hanging fruit of the day to day that is also gnawing at me. So that's just one small example. It's not transformative, let's say, but it is a 1% thing over time that will be transformative.
Right.
Um,
That's I mean, right. I mean, it's this, if you expect instant overnight transformation, you're bound to be disappointed. But if you take those 1%, 2%, 3% wins and you build upon them,
yeah,
ultimately over time, you're transforming your practice
yeah,
and transforming the way you engage with your work.
100%. So, to our listeners and our viewers, if you're finding this conversation helpful and valuable, don't forget to hit subscribe, turn on the notifications so you're always updated on these great conversations and rich content that is going to make you a better business person, more fulfilled in your life. And you'll learn specifically from Greg how to contextualize and really approach marketing, business, AI, and so many other things. Greg, let's move on a little bit. And I
Sure
think we
thing.
talked about this, we covered it, maintaining the human touch, right? But there's, in event planning, the relationships are so crucial. So, how do we, from your perspective, your years of working with some very large brands, some very cool, specific industries, you have such a great breadth of experience. You know, how do we maintain being aware, being up to date, being able to utilize technology and maintain, especially in event planning, these relationships, this human element, the empathy, which is just so crucial. It's like the connective tissue of it all.
Yeah. Um, I could probably answer this in a number of different ways. One of the lessons I've learned from working with so many organizations, not as a speaker, but as a consultant, or when I worked inside ad agencies and marketing consultancies and things like that, and just certainly researching and and doing the work I do, is that a lot of organizations, especially large organizations, seem to have over the years, nothing to do with AI, been, it almost seems like woefully confused as to what matters and what doesn't matter when it comes to customer relationships. And the
Hmm.
easy and obvious examples are, look at the way organizations over the years have sought to do anything and everything possible to distance themselves from the customer support call, right? It went to call trees, it got outsourced to other countries, or even just outsourced in, in the country. Now, of course, you've got organizations saying let the chatbot handle it, right? But what is the most valuable thing between a company and its customer? That direct line of interaction, right? But that's the first thing most companies look to outsource or defray the cost of, and they devalue it, right? So I think in this day and age, especially because there is the ability to automate so many different types of tasks with AI, it's critically important that you make an informed and considered decision around what should be automated, right? At the end of the day, anything that can be automated will be automated. But really be smart about making those decisions, and really think through even just your individual day job. You know, every job is a collection of tasks. There is a whole mess, a whole bunch of those tasks are going to be automatable. And that's probably not where you are creating your most value, right? It's important. I'm not saying it's not important to do scheduling and follow up emails, like these kind of rote and routine things. But that's not how you create your value in all
All right.
likelihood.
So, Greg, let's thread the needle because this is take it a little bit further. So, what can be automated, right? And the idea is freed up for more relationships, more creativity, connecting in a more real, meaningful way. I think you said earlier. So,
Yes.
for leaders that are involved in that, right? How can they make the smart decision, the important decision? And this is like, now we're getting onto the psychologists or the psychiatrists. We're getting onto the couch here, keeping your workforce, your people engaged at the same time, knowing that you're taking tasks out of their hand, right? It's like this needle to thread. And then maybe one or two real life examples where there's a conflict or a healthy kind of confrontation between a couple of activities or rote things that you do daily, and why do you choose to automate one or and not the other?
Sure. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you've touched on a couple of things.
And I,
One
I
is,
do run-on sentence
yeah,
compound
that's
questions. I mix
so do I.
metaphors. I mix generations. So I'm
I
I'm
do.
just
I
I'm
do the.
only human.
I know. I do the same thing with my answers. Um, so one thing I heard in there was this sort of friction that exists between what people are doing and what they could or should be doing, and how this potentially is threatening, which is essentially at the core of the AI will take my job conversation, right? For better or for worse, I think a lot of jobs inside organizations are kind of defined around a lot of the rote routine repeatable tasks, right? It's a factory kind of mentality for this sort of post factory knowledge economy we work in. And there is this fear that gets created around, well, let's, I don't know, I'm a customer support person at or member support at an association, let's say, and a lot of my time is spent fielding incoming inquiries from our members with the same kinds of questions over and over and over. When does my membership renew? What's my membership rate? Which tier did I qualify for again? When's your conference? What time does it begin? Like all
How
these
do
kind
I
of simple things.
register?
Right. How do I register? Is it, I locked myself out of my members only section of the website. How do I get back in? Right. That might be 40, 50, 70% of sometimes of somebody's job. Every one of those routine and repeatable member inquiries can be automated, right? Can be handled. A lot of it can be handled by a vanilla chatbot, and then by a generative AI chatbot, and very soon by an AI agent who can unlock your account for you and provide you with a new password credential or whatever. Who can send you the receipt after you've done a transaction, whatever the case may be. But a lot of our, and it kind of goes to the notion of busyness and productivity, right? That 70% of your time, you're productive if you've handled it, you've cleared your queue. Leadership needs to be very clear that they are reprioritizing, redefining, and redesigning your role in a way that benefits not just the organization, but also you as an individual contributor. So a lot of that comes down to change management, to communication,
Right.
to being open and honest and having a legitimate process around how you roll these things out thoughtfully. And some of those things that I just rattled through are some very real things. We're working with one association where we are working with their membership service organization. We're working across the organization, but when we talk to their membership service people, the number of specific things that they're doing that are so repeatable and so automatable, like handling these routine. An email comes in, somebody looking to know when their membership renews, and somebody has to go into the system, look up their record, find that
Email them.
information, email it back out. When you can automate all of that, that takes a huge load off of somebody's plate, so they can do what? Deal with the more complicated requests,
Right.
deal with an angry member who maybe isn't getting value, and help that member understand how to get more value, come up with new program ideas that can make membership more valuable, right? There's a lot of things that you can do to spend your time that are going to be more valuable for, more rewarding, I think, for the individual, right? More valuable to the association, better to the member, or better to the attendee in the case of an event that's not an association event. So it's, looking for these things that you spend a lot of time on that tend not to have a whole lot of reward attached to them, right? And that are often repeatable, right? Are you, or even better, multiple people across your organization doing that same thing over and over and over and over and over again? And then there are, of course, other areas where maybe it's not a core competency. And I don't know if you have a no bad language rule for your show,
No,
but
not at all.
and this is not really a particularly bad word, but I feel like if you suck, AI can make you suck less, right? But it won't
Mhm.
make you a superhero.
If your shirt,
But
if
there are
you're a
some things
dirty
that,
shirt, you might get a little bit cleaner, maybe.
right? And like, not, all of us suck at something, right? Um, and like if you're not a great writer and you find yourself struggling into kind of burning the midnight oil to come up with, 5 different ways to summarize an abstract, or to
Yeah.
rewrite a session description, or to create social media posts after the keynote or
Yeah.
whatever, right? That's something that it's just not in your core competency, that you can lean on AI to do even a little bit better. And that
Yeah.
if that saves you time and produces a better outcome,
Yeah.
then
No. And
now.
and I think how we're using it in my own organization, the Keynote Curators, is, Greg, I'm auditing. I'm a small organization, but we're really looking at, from my perspective, what are these things that you're exactly talking about that are repeatable, that are low hanging fruit, level one type activity,
Right.
and then asking my team, we're now going to recover some of this time. How can we redirect it? Where do you see, not like a menu of options, but the things that are coming back as ideas are great. And I feel like the feedback I've gotten is that our team, our people feel, dare I say, more empowered, or that there's a little bit of a shift in their skill and it's being leveraged or utilized, or it has a different kind of frame on which to kind of grow and
Yeah.
live, as opposed to I'm making the donuts again, and it becomes very rote and
Right.
you feel kind of
Yeah.
smaller and minimized,
Yeah. And it
So
it sounds, I mean, yeah, it sounds maybe a little bit kind of, I don't know, is it Pollyanna to put it
sure.
this way? But certainly it sounds trite. But you know, as a speaker or even as a consultant in many cases, like it's not my job to tell you whether you should use AI to reduce headcount, grow headcount, keep headcount the same. Your CFO is probably going to make that decision based on the economics of your business. But at the end of the day, I do firmly believe that we have an obligation to our workforce, the people in our organizations, to empower them with this technology and to
Yeah.
elevate them with this
Yeah.
technology. It should not be a technology that's used to kind of drive people down to the lowest common denominator. It should be the
Yeah.
other way around. Empower them to do the things that are bigger and better.
I mean, look, I'm an FOX. I'm a full-on Xer. So thank God thank goodness my team are not Xers or boomers. They're the younger
Yeah.
generation, and they're leaning into it, and I'm learning from them. And um, just that. I mean, you can use the word empower, but to really, it's a challenge. Okay, I'm now offloading. I'm a ship. I'm going to take the cargo that is rote and repeatable. And now with that empty space, you can do anything. What are you going to do? And I'm not trying to falsely inflate my people, but I'm saying, okay, the uniqueness of your skill set is now in the spotlight. Let it shine, and it's not going to be covered. That light's not going to be covered by, oh God, I have to go make another donut, metaphorically speaking.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want
And
to
I think
go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say, I think all of this, we're speaking a lot about sort of the productivity side of AI right now, obviously. And then I also think, and I'll say this briefly, and then I'll get back to you,
Please
is,
take your time. Take your
is
time.
that, is that, you know, since we're talking obviously so much about, and so much of your audience is event professionals, there, we shouldn't lose sight of the opportunity for innovation, right? Because a lot of, and I rattled off a bunch of this stuff early in the episode as well, but a lot of the potential and power when it comes to AI for events comes down to the experience as well. How do you innovate your event? How do you create a better experience, right? And that can be sort of the gimmicky stuff, right? Let's use computer vision to allow our attendees to, kind of, check in, with their face rather than waiting online for their badge and their bag. But, it's also down to the real practical stuff. Like, how do you connect attendees with each other for one-on-one networking? Incredibly
I love
valuable. I
that.
talked
Yeah.
earlier about how do you connect them with the right exhibitors on the trade show floor, right? Which may even give you a way to increase rates for some of those exhibitors, which is money, right? And then down to customized agendas and stuff like that. Instead of having to flip through a giant book, have a chat with a bot who recommends the right sessions based on my interests and tells me where to go next or whatever. All of a sudden you stand apart when you do these kinds of things to make your event, feel and look and be different from the run of the mill conference.
Yeah, people feel accompanied, and really like somebody shoulder to shoulder in those examples that you gave. Again, to our audience, I just encourage you, chime in the comments on this episode. How have you been using AI? How have you been using the tools? We'd love to hear from you all. Get your thoughts. It would just be great. Get your comments and engage with us. We're about to wrap up, Greg. And again, I make this self-effacing comment, but it's actually true. I'm not the valedictorian. I'm closer to the short bus, but I don't know how politically correct that is these days.
Probably not correct at all, but
I had this occurrence. I wouldn't even own it as an idea, that I was using ChatGPT, and then I was using it on a proposal, and then I asked. I made a prompt to help me. I used the prompt to improve my prompt, and I felt like, ooh, I'm gonna get like a gold star. This is like so unique. And then I went over to the Google, as my mother calls it, the Google, and I just started like how to use prompts to improve prompts. And there's like a whole universe of it. I thought for a minute, like, I'm not going to say I had an original idea, but I was like, God, this is actually, wow, I'm using it to work itself. How original. And there was a whole universe around that. But the point is that that came up kind of naturally, albeit I found out later it's not that original, which is fine, but it's kind of cool to use the technology on itself.
yeah.
I just
Yeah,
felt
and
that,
it's It's interesting though, because like I'm trying to think how to say this. I'm not a huge fan of like the concept of prompt engineering, especially when it elevated to this point where everyone was like, "That's the job of the future." It's like, no, it's not. It's like a a bug in the system that we have to know how to prompt engineer. That will correct itself over time as these systems become more sophisticated. But working with a lot of clients, they're always asking, how do I get the most out of these systems? And you would be surprised, even though it was not an original idea, the number of people who made that logical leap that you did
Yeah.
um, is relatively low. It just doesn't occur to people. Let me ask this AI how to prompt it to get a better response, right? And that's actually a more advanced prompting technique. Or asking the AI, here's what I want you to do, ask me questions so that I can fill in the gaps that allow
Yeah.
you to give me a better
Totally.
answer, right? Things like that. And it's the kind of thing you only get when I think you use these tools regularly and you're
Exactly.
willing to and open to experimenting. A lot
Exactly.
of people tried ChatGPT once 18 months ago
Yeah.
and were disappointed with it, or the novelty wore off, or whatever, and they've not gone back to it. And ChatGPT is obviously only one tool. There's hundreds of tools. But I think you need to, as any kind of a professional, do exactly what you're doing, which is make the effort to experiment, experience it for yourself, and just try stuff, iterate. And not everything's going to work. You're going to fail a lot, right? You'll get some dopey response that makes no sense whatsoever. And, shame on you if you use it in something. But,
Right.
it's that kind of thing, this willingness to just play
Yeah.
and giving yourself that permission to play that's critical right now.
Yeah. As my grandmother said, how do you know what an apple tastes like? You got to take a bite. I mean, you got to get in there and just type in a prompt and cut your teeth and learn. And, not only did I ask it to help me with prompts, but, now I'm getting way out of my wheelhouse. But now I'm kind of have templates, right? And and so because they're reusable and repeatable,
Right,
back to our whole idea, so that I'm going back, kind of utilizing it for it to produce some sameness, right? Or not
right,
sameness in copy, but generate the ideas or generate the summaries that I'm looking for. Specifically, that were summaries. So before we
exactly.
wrap up, just everybody, thanks for sticking with us. We're really coming to the final stretch here. I urge you, subscribe, share with your neighbor, share with your chat GPT prompt engineer who will be out of work soon. Share with anybody and everybody, and you can catch up on our past and upcoming content. So let's just finish off with keynote speaking. What should event planners, from your point of view as a keynote speaker yourself, as a consultant, somebody who's on the ground in the trenches, really on the court of life, working with businesses, but also speaking on the stage, what should they look for to make sure that, speeches are engaging in today's world where it's more demanding? People want experiences, people want to stand out, people want deployable, actionable takeaways.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably a few things. And again, this could be another litany, a list of, many, many things. But, and it's hard to answer this question without sounding self serving, but because obviously,
Please use your own
right?
experience.
I think certainly, and some of these sound obvious, but they aren't always, is, a speaker who really aligns with your organization, with your vision, with your mission, with your event themes and topics, right? It's easy to get, sometimes you need a name to fill seats, right? You need your Matthew McConaughey, as we were talking about before we began recording. And that's fine, but Matthew McConaughey is not going to, tell a CPA anything about accounting that the CPA doesn't already know, right? If you're running an
Right,
accounting event. But, when you're looking at a business speaker or sort of a motivational type speaker, if you're more of like a lifestyle conference or whatever, make sure that there's real tight alignment. Even if the topic sounds right, there might be things about style or point of
right,
view that, that just doesn't align. At the same time, I think speakers who bring something new and different to the table. A lot of times, a lot of speakers on the same general subject matter tend to have the same general point of view. Don't be afraid about bringing in speakers who are going to buck against that and bring
Hmm.
ideas that your audience has really never heard about or thought about before. From my perspective, I think a lot of, it's valuable to me as a speaker. I'm sure it's even more valuable to the organizer. A speaker who's willing to roll up their sleeves and work with you and customize. We all know the speaker who's given the same speech for 10 years off of the book they wrote 10 years ago, and that's extreme, obviously. But, a speaker who's really willing to contextualize it for your audience, because that's where it starts to get real. I can throw big ideas at people all day,
That's
right? But at
right.
the end of the day, the audience needs to hear real examples that resonate with them, that feel like the work they're doing, the life they're living in, the company they're representing, or whatever. And I think the ability for speakers to really bring that to the table is important. And I guess that leads me to my last thing, which is in my area in particular, right? So I speak largely on AI now, but more broadly on digital transformation or future and technology trends, that kind of thing. And I've been doing that for years and years. But there are a lot of freshly minted AI speakers who, a year ago were metaverse speakers, and a year before that were crypto and NFT speakers, and a year before that were social media speakers. And right, we change with times, and like the world has evolved and whatever. But like I've been touching on at least AI for a decade or more in my speeches on digital
Sure.
transformation and futures. It just happens to be the hot topic right now, so I more than touch on it. But I think my point is, I guess, as it relates to that is, I would encourage anyone to look for speakers who more than talk the talk, but actually walk the walk, right? To me, it's always been vital that I'm not just a presenter, I'm also a practitioner. I'm in my, I'm sleeves rolled up, sitting alongside decision makers in companies, helping them make decisions and do stuff, right? And being able to bring that to the table and not just regurgitate the hype I read, I think is important. And I'm not just talking about me. There are many speakers in that same, cut from that same cloth, but looking for speakers who can bring those real world examples, who can say, I've done this. Here are the pitfalls. I've done this. Here are the opportunities. Not
Mm.
just, I read this and Sam Altman said,
Yeah.
because there is a lot of risk for that right now. So, I mean, to me, those are the main things.
You just perfectly delineated our curation process, our curation methodology. A meeting professional may do it yourself, may even go to ChatGPT and ask for a list of speakers on AI, and they might get it. But where the human element comes in, I'll be able to discard a few immediately because I know they're just not aligned with the values or your core virtues of the organization. A couple of others, the tone or the texture of how they present, their style, even the aesthetics are also going to be discarded. I can save you time there. A few others are out of the price range. Maybe ChatGPT isn't completely informed. And that's where the human element comes in. So we're gathering all that information that you just delineated beautifully, synthesizing it, and then placing it in front of our buyers where they're going to be connecting on values. They're going to be connecting on messaging. You're going to be somebody who has skin in the game, at least in the sense that they've done the real work. It's not a book that they wrote 10, 15 years ago, which albeit could be an extreme example, might be a little self-serving here, but that is where, again, the technology can only take you so far, and then you need that human element, right? That human intervention, a human in the loop, if you will, if I can use that phrase from you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Greg, we've come to the end here. I think I've said that a few times, but now it's real. I just want to thank thank our viewers for joining us. If you're curious about artificial intelligence in events, check out a couple of other interviews that we've did they're packed with insights as well. Share this with a friend, share this with the world, and come get smarter with us. We'll see you next time.